Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Katie Pavlich in for Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us. Tonight we'll take a look back at the highlights of 2013 and a look ahead to what's to come in the new year. From budget gridlock to the Obamacare debate to White House scandals, 2013 was quite a year for the Beltway and the Obama administration. Fox's Michelle Macaluso has a look at the biggest political stories of 2013.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
In President Obama's second inaugural address, he laid out his agenda for his second term, but also used the speech to tackle a social issue head on.
That all of us are created equal is the star that guides us still, just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall.
Several months later, as protesters from both sides flooded the steps of the Supreme Court, two 5-4 rulings from the justices granted greater rights to gay couples, while also ruling California's voter-approved ban on same-sex marriages as unconstitutional.
And to the justices of the Supreme Court, thank you for affirming the principle of equal justice under the law.
Traditional marriage advocates point out same-sex marriage is still up to the individual states and urge their supporters to stay engaged.
I think the message is very clear. If you do not proactively act to protect marriage, activists, politicians, and judges will redefine it out from under you.
We will support and defend the Constitution.
Meanwhile, a freshman Congress was sworn in January, with Republicans making spending cuts their biggest priority.
We cut wasteful spending and we balance the budget.
In March, $85 billion in automatic federal spending cuts passed by the previous Congress went into effect. Democrats were highly critical of the cuts, but originally agreed in hopes of moving toward a greater budget deal.
This is senseless to go on as we are with these cuts that are with a meat cleaver, not a scalpel.
But bitter partisan battles ensued. And as in recent years, the government was funded through a series of short-term spending bills. This paved the way for the first government shutdown in 16 years, when House Republicans refused to fund the government unless key provisions in the president's health care law were stripped or delayed.
It tries to masquerade as something that does something positive, which it does not.
Barricades went up on the National Mall as well as around national parks and monuments throughout the country. Just weeks later, after the country nearly defaulted on its loan obligation for the first time in history, was a compromise reached. Republicans, who took much of the blame for the standoff, felt somewhat vindicated after the botched rollout of Obamacare. At first, it was technical glitches with the healthcare.gov website, but as more people signed up for the plans, they discovered higher prices, less coverage, and perhaps most significantly, that despite the president's promise, consumer choice when it comes to doctors is limited.
We knew this was a promise he could not keep, and now it's a promise he has broken.
President Obama's credibility had taken a hit earlier in the year when revelations surfaced that the National Security Agency spied on the emails and phone calls of millions, including foreign leaders of ally nations.
We can and must be more transparent.
Edward Snowden, a former NSA contractor, took responsibility for leaking to the British newspaper, The Guardian. The 30-year-old Snowden, who called himself a whistleblower, hid out in China before ultimately finding asylum in Russia. The reporter who originally interviewed Snowden says the leaker claims to have more information he has yet to reveal.
There are vast programs of both domestic and international spying that the world will be shocked to learn about.
As 2013 draws to a close, there will be plenty left over for lawmakers next year, from immigration reform to overseeing the dismantling of Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. But perhaps the most politically divided issue could be Iran, and whether the administration's efforts at curbing their nuclear ambitions will be successful. In Washington, Michelle Macaluso, Fox News.
And with me now, Democratic strategist Richard Fowler and Republican strategist Noel Nickpour. Richard, we'll go to you first. Was it a good year for the president and liberals as a whole based on what we just saw?
Oh, thanks for having me, Katie. It's good to see you in the host chair. The president had a tough year this year. There's no questions, no equivocations about it. I think if you were to ask him, I think it's probably the toughest year of his administration. But the good news is there's nowhere to go from here but up. And I think as we go into the next year, and we'll see in his State of the Union address, the president will talk about how do we solve, income inequality, how do we solve immigration reform, and I think we'll see the president go back on message and be stronger in 2014 than he was in 2013 for sure.
Well, speaking of going up from here, Noel, how do you think Republicans can capitalize in 2014 off of the mistakes made in 2013 by the Obama administration?
Well, Katie, we have so many things to choose from, don't we now?
We do, yes.
And I think one of the things that we need to do is to not only continue letting the liberal Democrats be the bus stop prophets with their rant, trying to turn everything, and blaming the GOP. I think this is the opportunity for the GOP to seize the moment and capture new people within our brand and reach out to people by saying that we have solutions to this bad government. We have areas where we can fix things and show them how we can do this and attract more people to our party, and eventually, in 2014, make it a GOP-controlled Senate.
Mm-hmm. So, Richard, it seems like based on 2013 and all the problems, it's going to be really difficult for Democrats to run on President Obama's first year of his second term. So, responding to that, GOP has a lot in their playbook. They have a lot to go after Democrats with. Are Democrats really going to keep running on Obamacare and all of these things that you just mentioned?
Well, I think Democrats have a couple things to run on, and where they're going to be strong is, one, they're going to run on beyond the benefits of the Affordable Care Act. No question the rollout was botched. We can debate that all day. But I think with the impacts, though, of the law, 3 million people back on their parents' health care insurance, 3 million young people back on their parents' health care insurance, 50 million folks with pre-existing conditions now can get health care. But beyond that point, the Democratic Party is also going to run on fixing our immigration system. They're going to run on why we need to raise the minimum wage. There seems to be this fever pitch happening both in Washington and across the country on both the right and the left about raising the minimum wage and making sure that everybody has a shot at the American dream. And I think Democrats can capitalize on that, on top of the fact that Democrats are also talking to the emerging majority. They're talking to Latino voters. They're talking to African-American voters. They're talking to women. They're talking to young people. And the Republican Party has not figured out exactly how to do that.
Well,
and I think they had an opportunity to do it during Marco Rubio.
Oh, I think that you
during the
probably
immigration
talk
reform.
to groups in a way that you would talk to anyone. But, just because Washington has been bickering all year, Republicans and Democrats, doesn't mean that we haven't come to some agreement. And you, Richard, say that Paul Ryan is actually one of the big winners of 2013. And why is that?
I think Paul Ryan is a big winner of 2013 because he actually got something through the Republican caucus that was passable by the United States Senate. I think this sets up Paul Ryan to truly be a leader in his party going into 2014 and possibly 2016. He's sort of people count him out because he's not your Ted Cruz, he's not your Marco Rubio, he's not your Chris Christie, but his ability to manage and sort of maneuver both the House and the United States Capitol will give him big pluses as he goes into 2014 and 2016.
Well, I don't remember hearing any of that when Paul Ryan passed his first budget and when he was selected as Mitt Romney's vice presidential candidate, but we'll go back there, I guess, when you guys are praising him in 2014 and 2016. But, Noel, you can't talk about the biggest winners without talking about the biggest losers. Who do you think was the biggest loser of 2013?
Well, of course, biggest losers, if you're looking at something, on a broad spectrum, you've got to say the Obamacare website. I mean, that's such a huge loser. It's very obvious. But I can't forget about, more of America's big loss, and that's got to be Benghazi, where our beloved American ambassador was murdered. Mm-hmm. And so we can't forget about something like that. And I think as far as looking at the biggest loser, it's got to be the Obamacare website, the Obamacare rollout. It hurt everybody that it was supposed to benefit, and it also hurt people that the president says was not going to be, we're not going to be affected by that. So I think that there are several things to choose from, IRS, Solandrum, I mean, so many things that if you're going to narrow it, I would say it's got to be the Obamacare website, because even the liberal Democrats admit it was a fail.
Right, exactly. Well, one of those things also was the NSA scandal, right? And the big news coming out this week was a judge ruling that basically the NSA collecting information on Americans is constitutional, which goes against something that another judge said just before Christmas. Richard, do you think that this serves as a setback for the American people, being that the administration has the courts on their side and now don't really have an incentive to do much for reform?
Well, I think we have to wait to see on that, Katie. We'll have to see what the president does have a huge packet of recommendations on his desk. The president's going to speak about that in early January. And that'll be a tall tale sign of sort of what happens next and how we sort of fix this intelligence, post 9/11 culture that is sort of requiring more and more information from the American people. That is an issue I think is bipartisan. You see folks on the far right and on the far left who have some issues with NSA spying. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens there. But I got to tell you, I don't know.
Students. Wrap it up.
Well, I don't see Benghazi being the biggest loser. I think the biggest loser is the government shutdown. The fact that we shut the government down because of political games is sad.
Noel, quickly, you get the last word.
Well, I think, I hate to say this, but I see Benghazi as absolutely shameful, and I want to, just remark on that, because I think the shutdown compared to Benghazi, a life lost,
$24 million lost in the United States economy.
So what? It's a life.
Thank you guys both so much for coming on tonight.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Katie.
Coming up, the latest way Obamacare will take a bite out of your wallet. Stick around. We'll be right back.